Here is Jamaal Bowman before he was in Congress, a principal. He's an educator. So he has emotional, direct experience with what it's like to protect children in the school system. And so he kind of went off and was vocally incredibly frustrated about the Republicans in the House, now they have the majority, refusing to support gun control legislation in the wake of yet another school shooting in Tennessee. And Bowman basically calls out Republicans to their face and gets into it with one of the more pro-gun representatives in the House, Thomas Massie. Take a look.
Ask them, and they go to the Senate, ask the same questions. They're cowards. They're all cowards. They won't do anything to save the lives of our children at all. Cowards. Pressure them. Force them to respond to the question, why the hell won't you do anything to save America's children? And let them explain that all the way up until election day on 2024. Let them explain it all the way up to election day on 2024. They're freaking cowards. They're gutless. They're not here. I'm talking about gun violence.
You know, there's never been
I'm talking about gun violence.
a school that allows teachers to carry.
Carry guns? You think more guns lead to more death? More guns lead to more death. Look at the data. You're not looking at any data. You're carrying the water for the gun lobby. Look at the data. More guns lead to more deaths. States that have open carry laws have more death.
In every school
States that have open carry laws have more death. Are you listening to what I'm saying? Calm down. Children are dying. 9-year-old children. Because the solution is not arming teachers. Have you ever worked in a school? 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 It's a yes or no question. Have you ever worked in a school? You will not answer my question. Don't stop and talk to me. Okay, I'll bring it down a notch.
Yeah. Thomas Massie has not worked in a school, but he has raised a lot of money from corporations, and I'm pretty sure he has some trails of breadcrumbs that will lead to organizations like the NRA. But you know, let this image speak for itself here. Thomas Massie, that's the representative. Getting into it with Jamaal Bowman there. Jamaal Bowman's actually worked with children, understands what it means to protect them, to have their well-being in mind. Thomas Massie knows everything about guns and ammunition. And I just want to reiterate this point that I made earlier as well, because I think it can't be overstated. Republicans refusing to act on gun control is not just because they have an obsession with guns and they see it as in their political best interest. They also don't really care to do anything about gun control because they're fine with public spaces being fairly unsafe, and public spaces include our public institutions like schools. From their efforts to go after critical race theory, make schools inhospitable to teachers, particularly if they're LGBTQ or black, non-conservative in states like Florida. Their years-long efforts to undercut teachers' unions, demonizing them on Fox News over and over and over again, forcing them back into schools during COVID, not listening to the Chicago Teachers Union, saying that they're against the children that they are employed for very low wages to educate and protect and spend time with on a daily basis. From the opposition to free school lunches in other states. Thankfully, Minnesota just passed it, but you saw the extremism from the Republican minority on the Minnesota State House floor basically arguing against it, saying that that should not be a part of what a public school provides. They are deeply invested ideologically to their core, the Republican Party, in ensuring that the institution of public school, and I know that in this Tennessee instance, it was a private school, but still, this is a part of like a broader effort in making these spaces inhospitable largely. And so this all ties into it. They're all about private rights, my private right to own a gun, my private right to hoard as much capital as possible at the expense of other people because they're not interested in constructing a collective society.
If I may, could I play these 2 short clips of Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett?
Yes, the guy talking about homeschooling.
Yes, being asked about the first clip, just being asked what if anything Congress can do to fix it, and then asked about what he would do to protect his daughter.
Yeah,
just because I think this is pretty emblematic of that exact dichotomy.
Go ahead.
So this is the first clip, and then I'll get to the second one after.
This actually is like what sparked that thought I had. This very clip. So great minds here.
3 precious little kids lost their lives, and I believe 3 adults, I believe it's, and the shooter, of course, lost their life too. So it's a horrible, horrible situation, and we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals, and my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese, and he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
Conservatives have a very fatalistic view of society. Even if you take that at like face value and you take like face value and like, oh, he's not lying just so we can, avoid doing anything. It's just like, that is something that conservatives express a lot, that there is no point to society because there's very little that it can serve to do that, a private corporation can't do, your family, an extended group of like acquaintances can't do for you better. And, you either believe that and have a very reactionary view about society, or you don't. You believe that we can do things like public health and that this constitutes like a public health crisis. And, it's just unfortunate that our conversation is dominated by people who more believe like him that, well, because our society's infrastructure has been, designed to fail in some ways and also eroded by the actions of people who share his ideology and closely related ideologies, then there's nothing that any society might do to prevent this. Don't look at any other society that doesn't have this and has prevented it. It's unpreventable.
It's a way for them to undercut government more broadly too, right, Brandon? Like, because if you don't, if society can't be better, then what's the point in having a robust government that like provides for the public good? Yeah. It's
the austerity cycle. You weaken organizations until they become ineffective. Then you go like, look at how ineffective they are. We should weaken them some more.
Yes.
And what makes it more stark in this case is it shows you, again, either how exceptional Americans think they are or how incurious they are, because we're just the only country in the world who lives like this. And it's just a problem that doesn't have to exist. I know it's like deeply rooted in like American, imperialistic cultural traditions that we got to have our guns. What if I hate to say it, what if the engines come across the plains and attack our settlement? It's just like, we don't live in that world anymore. And people still want to pretend like, nowadays it's not the Native Americans, it's not the Black slave uprising, it's not the Muslims, but it's the, LGBTQ Antifa gender terrorists who are going to come for us. We're just a country that's been clinging to our guns for so long that we've forgotten that it's due to paranoid fear. And even when people talk about arming themselves on the left, it's always in opposition to that like deeper imperialist culture of guns and maybe reclaiming it. It doesn't say it doesn't exist. It's just like you can be an island in that culture, but the gun culture in America is very deeply dominated by a position that like, what if someone breaks into my home and tries to attack my 3 young babies and wife? I got to have an AR-15. And that person tends to be, brown skinned, maybe a different religion, when in reality, it just doesn't even reflect how violence in this country happens, which is usually by someone
Yeah, we had a caller go speaking to that articulating that very fear that you say, Brandon, sincerely. But Bradley, it has the second clip. Let's play this too, because this just it's helping our points that we're trying to make in this segment here.
What should be done to protect people like your little girl from being safe in school?
Well, we homeschool her, but that's our decision. Some people don't have that option, and frankly, some people don't need to do it. I mean, they don't have to. It just suited our needs much better.
Thank you.
Good?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's the thing. If you want to protect your children, you have to have the capacity, the money to privatize their education through homeschooling or going to some school. I mean, even in this instance, this was a private school, but again, it is about undercutting our public institutions, primarily public education.
And the implication of that statement is essentially, well, we wouldn't have that problem. My daughter's safe because she's in my house, and I have guns in my house.
No one's ever been shot in their home.
All right. He also provided no answer to that question because he doesn't care. I mean, like,
Right, exactly.
He still could have said, to be clear, about my daughter doesn't go to public school, but what we should do or what we can do. No, he was just like, oh, my kid's not involved. That's it. I'm out of here. Why do I'm not gonna give you an answer.
She's fine.
Not my problem. Not my problem.
Yeah. What is your job? He's a representative from Tennessee. Tennessee. They are the ones that just experienced the state, that shooting. And he's saying there's nothing, like, what's my job? I'm not doing my job. I don't need to do my job. What's my job as a representative for this state? To just, like, to think about my own kid.
After all of the concerned uncles at PTA meetings, you almost have to award at least him admitting that, like, he doesn't really have as much skin in the game, or he doesn't perceive himself as having as much skin in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just so happens I watch a lot of God's Not Dead movies, and this is what the fourth one is about, I want to say. And yeah, it just so happens that if you homeschool your kid, you can also reinforce all your values to them. They never will come into contact with values that you don't explicitly agree with, or likely they won't unless they get it through social media, but you can control that pretty well too. And by the time you let them out of the house, like, they'll most likely just be little reflections of you.
Yep.
And so it just fits neatly into a certain right-winger's prescription for their children's anyway.
It's just narcissism as disguised as parenting. Like, they don't want their child to grow or be anything except a mirror image of their own idea of the world.
Right.
I'm glad Bethany Mandel wasn't here to hear that.
Who? I'm sorry?
I'm glad Bethany Mandel's not here to hear to say that. We wouldn't want her to break down.
I mean,
again.
a lot of it also plays into that really weird mentality that, like, you own your kids. Like, I think that's one of the grossest things that comes from out of all of this, that, like, you don't view your own children as their own person, as their own people who will grow up and be themselves, have their own personality that may very well be very distinct and different than yours. No, you just view them as, you brought them into this world, you can take them out. I hate that sort of mentality. It's so gross. So
weird.
Gross.
I think that's a unfortunately deeply held belief within our society. But I think a lot of that also, is at least stems from a particular subsection of our society that is allowed to wield their kids like weapons against the rest of us. And if you don't have that, control over them, if you're like a suburban household who wants to be like, my little Jimmy shouldn't be exposed to this, and Jimmy goes like, I want to be exposed to this. And by this, I mean like Drag Story Hour or CRT or like Disney movies that are too woke. Then they don't get to position themselves as parents who are willing, who are propagating society, putting forth the next generation, and therefore should have extra say over this sort of stuff, because it's not every parent who thinks this way. And certainly, even if it were every parent who thinks this way, we don't let every parent like put themselves on the news and tell us that we have to reorganize society because they don't like what books their kid is reading. Because certainly if a black family did that about having to read about all the goddamn slave owners in our society's history, we wouldn't even entertain that. But if it's the middle class family from
pushing against it with the anti-CRT stuff. Sorry, go on.
No, but if it's a middle class family who's better able to index traditional status quo values, then yeah, sure, come on television and tell us not just what's your kid, but what some kid you're vaguely related to, what you think they should have, and how we should reorganize society for that. Okay, it's transparent.
Yeah.
What they say, cowards always hide behind rules and kids.
I like that. All right, guys. I don't think we're gonna have enough time for calls. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to do this. I apologize.
We did take like two or three though. It wasn't like
three. We took three. That's usually my. I'm like, I feel if I only take two, I feel really bad. If I take three, that's decent. I was hoping to take four today, but I'm sorry. We just had so much stuff to get to. I'm gonna read like 15 more AMs and get out of here. 10,
sure, you don't want to read maybe 16 or maybe 14 or
I don't know. Maybe I'll settle on that. I'm not even gonna count, and we'll just see where it falls. The audience can do that for me.
That's what Sam does, though. Is like Sam will say
he sets a limit and then exceeds it every time.
Sam will say 10 more and we'll get out of here, and I'm like, he's on 14, and he's like, all right, 6 more.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not how that works.